Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Life Sciences Virtual Trailblazer Group. And today I am really excited. This is one I have been looking forward to for a long time. But we are joined by Rosalind Beasley, who is going to be talking about agent collectives. And I have been like watching this one, so I hope the rest of you are just as excited as I am. Please feel free to write in the chat or ask questions in the question box. But Rosalind, with no further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you so that you can tell us all the exciting things you have to say.
Okay, great. So for anyone who doesn't know me, obviously Rosalind Beasley, and I've been in the life sciences space for 20 plus years and primarily focused on and compliance within organizations, whether it's med tech or pharmaceuticals. And I worked at Allergan many years ago and was responsible for implementing quality management systems within the organization. And that led me to actually start my own company to introduce the first cloud-based quality management system on the Salesforce platform. And that application went on to be acquired by a private equity, our company went on to be acquired by a private equity firm. And so I feel like I'm a bit of a pioneer in the space of life sciences on the Salesforce cloud. And I'm really excited about all these new things that are happening from an Agentforce perspective. And what I want to stress, and the purpose of this particular webinar and discussion is to talk about there needs to be some guardrails and some safety around it, right? Because in the end, what those agents are doing, and especially when there's multiple agents, can cause some compliance risk. That risk always existed. It existed before we had agentic AI. And I've got a lot of stories I could tell, and I'm sure Elise does too, where data crosses boundaries and we have major concerns. So let me go ahead and start a presentation that I prepared for today. So as I mentioned, I just wanted to go through a little bit of a brief background of myself, but I wanted to talk about, so Elise, I apologize to you. This is going to be very Salesforce centric, but in the life sciences ecosystem in Salesforce, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the fact that there are a number of applications in the App Exchange today from Salesforce partners. I just put a few of them out there for you today to see. A lot of them are in the regulated space. So we have applications that are laboratory information systems, quality management systems. We have others that are complaint handling, clinical ops, et cetera, right? And when a lot of these applications were introduced into the Salesforce application, there were a lot of additional requirements that went into developing those applications so that they could be compliant with ISO standards, FDA regulations, et cetera. And I'll just like curious who on the call today is familiar with GxP type applications. Just raise your hand. Okay, great. So you're familiar with a lot of the regulations that are required behind the scenes. So in addition to that, we have the life sciences clouds, right? Or life science cloud. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But then on top of that, we have Agentforce, which is the agents that are being defined on top of all of the clouds. A number of these vendors have also already started embedding AI into their applications too, whether you know that or not. And so we need to be cognizant of that as well. So when we think about agentic AI in particular, and agentic AI in a mixed environment, meaning we're running on the Salesforce platform. So we're running in an environment where we have data that is regulated and data and processes that are not regulated running in the same space. So how do we deal with that overlap? There's a number of risks. I've mentioned just 5 of them here. The first one being accountability and liability. We'll dive into each one of these. When you're in a multi-agent environment, there's always that challenge of really understanding the accountability of the particular agent. And then, as I mentioned before, data integrity and confidentiality risks. Then you have the scenario of there's a bit of black box decision making as well. And then there's a need for, because you're in that mixed environment, change control related to updates. And of course, all of you know that there's regulatory risk associated with it as well. Thank you, Andrew, by the way. So let's dive into what does that mixed environment look like. So when you think about it on the platform, we've got a lot of clouds out there. We've got Sales Cloud, Marketing Cloud. We've even got Service Cloud. We've got other other partners who have applications that are HR related, procurement related, finance related. Then you think about the extended ecosystem where you're connecting to other applications like an SAP or another ERP system. A lot of that's happening with these, even with our other partners, we're interfacing with a lot of other systems. So on the GxP side, we've got, again, those quality management systems, those complaint handling systems, those manufacturing execution systems. So how do we manage the risk associated with those? Because there's risk areas, right? Data is flowing across and between these various processes. As an example, and we'll dive into this a little bit deeper, but let's say you're developing a marketing campaign, right? But that marketing campaign in our world, portions of it are actually regulated, right? We need to really understand the verbiage in that marketing material and have it reviewed by legal and regulatory before it's actually published publicly. We have other scenarios where in the complaint handling space, right, we have information a lot of times in the Salesforce ecosystem. It is flowing from either Service Cloud or in some cases Sales Cloud into the complaint handling system, depending on how the complaint came in, right? But as soon as it moves into that complaint scenario, it's a risk area because now it's regulated. So you have to think about the data flow and the type of data that's flowing across these systems and the added complexity of agents now taking responsibility for some of those activities, right? So just wanted to set us up with that scenario. So now if we move on, when we think about accountability, it's really about ownership of decisions. And so if you have a AI agent that's actually acting autonomously, you really need to think about who's really responsible for that action that the agent is taking. And I'll actually pose it as a question. Like, this is always a fun question. Who's responsible for the activity that the agent takes, the actions that the agent takes? Elise, you probably have the answer to this one.
Yeah, I would say this has always been a discussion, but it's the process owner because that process owner somehow had that agent developed, right? So ultimately, the process owner, by allowing the agent to perform part of that process, is actually in the regulatory aspect responsible for it.
Absolutely. And that's
Yeah.
why we have to clearly define ownership and responsibilities for an agent, but ultimately, who's the human behind that decision? A lot of times we talk about human in the loop approvals. That's generally speaking going to be required in a regulated environment. So even if the agent took an action that ultimately led to a decision that was potentially going to have impact on product safety, patient safety, or even regulatory risk associated with it, there has to be a human that actually reviewed that decision and took responsibility for it, took accountability for it. And so that's something that I think a lot of people don't really grasp as they're starting to introduce agents into their environment. And also, one other key aspect is ensuring that your agents are aligned with your standard operating procedures. And there's technical ways that you can do that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So that's accountability and liability, and we'll move on to the next section here. So data integrity, I talked about this a little bit. So as I mentioned, these agents can, in some cases, be touching sensitive data. And it's important for us to understand, number one, where that data originated. And number two, do we need to ensure that information is, in some cases, masked, right, as it's moving through the ecosystem? We don't want a situation where an agent exposes information such as PII or PHI. So those are things that we need to really consider as we're defining our agents. And so number two there is basically saying there's a potential for unauthorized flows, right? And then, of course, there's things like, as we all know, we've all heard about, and this conversation really isn't going to dive into a lot of the things you've already discussed in the past about AI hallucinations. We all know AI can hallucinate, but we're going beyond that here. We all know that, it can be manipulated through prompt injection. Salesforce already has a lot of that kind of baked into the trust layer anyway. So we have to go beyond that and start thinking about things like role-based access for agents, right? What data can that agent actually see? What are the security guardrails that we need to put in place for a particular agent? And then very important, and there's one person on this call that I have this conversation with all the time, is data lineage. It's really important to keep that chain of custody over your data as it's flowing through your system. So risk number 3 is really about, as I mentioned, that black box decisioning. And everyone here is familiar with the fact that Agentforce is basically built on the Atlas reasoning engine, correct? And what that means is it's not just a basic chat bot where you ask it a question and it answers a question. It's really going through a planning and reasoning decision-making process before it provides you with an answer. So it's doing a lot of thinking on its own and deciding what actions to take and what responses to give you. And so that makes it a little bit challenging from the perspective of, now if you've got multiple agents and they're all doing a little bit of reasoning and planning, who's the agent that's playing the role of the supervisor, right? Who's actually traffic controlling the agents? We really need to start thinking about those things. It becomes a little bit difficult from an auditing perspective because we really need to be sure that we understand why those decisions were made. And there are ways that we can do that as well. But just to say, when we're audited in life sciences on the GxP side, we're often asked to provide evidence. And we need to be able to you need to be able to understand, how do I get that evidence from the underlying system? So with Agentforce, there are reasoning logs. You can access those reasoning logs through the command center. You can also access them via or through the Agentforce command center, which is a visual UI. And you can also access them through APIs as well. You need to be able to also understand the fact that once you cross the line into a GxP scenario, you have to adhere to Part 11 and Annex 11 Code of Regulations. And the reason for that is you need clear audit trails and you need clear electronic signatures for activities that are taking place. So that's why the human in the loop is important.
Hey, Rosalind. So we had a
Go
question
ahead.
from
Questions?
Pravina. Yeah, Pravina was wondering about the Epic EMR, and I think it was probably a slide ago.
Okay. What was the question?
So my question regarding if we have the Epic EMR should include in that previous slide where the like system was included SAP, and so do you think Epic EMR also should included in this
So
in
it's not a,
regulatory?
yes, it's not a full view, to be honest. It was just, what I could fit on the slide. So Absolutely. If you're interfacing to an Epic EMR, you do need to, yes, that risk boundary exists for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, very good question. It's actually even more challenging to
Yeah,
actually.
because nowadays companies are really having difficulty to if they integrate with Salesforce to Epic AMR still, and with Agentforce, it is also like a big risk, I would say.
Huge risk.
Yeah.
Especially, and you're definitely dealing with PII and PHI information in that particular flow for sure.
True. Yeah, definitely.
And so we talked a little bit about black box. Let's move on to just change control in general. So once you move into a mixed environment, change becomes a little bit more challenging. It's always been the case. Just from my perspective in implementing GxP systems on the Salesforce platform, and in some cases, our customers preferred that. A lot of times what we say is separate them, right? Deploy your GxP solution to one org and deploy anything else non-GxP to another org. That was like a lot of times what our customers insisted on, right? We just don't even want, well, we'll do the integrations where necessary and we'll control the integrations, but we don't want to mix them. But then we had other customers that said, we want a mixed environment. We don't want to manage two different orgs, deploy into our same org where we have Sales Cloud because we need data from Sales Cloud. Particularly customer information. And the challenge was, so from a change perspective, certainly the folks on the CRM side didn't want to adhere to the schedule that we had on the GxP side because we have to go through this validation process every time we make a change. So that makes it extremely challenging. So really understanding the change cycles that are acceptable in a non-GxP application versus the change cycles that are necessary for GxP is really important. So having the change control board that includes both is extremely important. And a lot of times it became and sometimes we used an agile approach where we had a release train and we were releasing on a schedule. And sometimes the regulated team often didn't get on board, right? The train kept going, but at the point in time when they were ready, they jumped on board for that next release. So definitely you want to make sure you have those release periods defined and define your periodic reviews and ensure that your change cycles are in sync, basically, as much as possible. Anyone have any questions about that? I heard something, but I don't think it was a comment.
No, I don't think it was a question. So I think you're good, Rosalind.
Okay. So then we come to regulatory risk, right? Many of you will be familiar with HIPAA, GDRP, and those, I would say, are things that the underlying qualification of the Salesforce platform, they're covered. Because if you go to trust.salesforce.com, you'll see that there are a number of certifications and a number of documents there that we have access to as partners and customers that prove that the platform, the underlying platform has been qualified from those perspectives. But there are a number of other things that it's not qualified for out of the box, right? It's not going to specifically address any particular FDA regulations. The applications that are being defined by app exchange vendors are doing that. So you want to look to them for that guidance. And then the bigger challenge is if the organization that you're working for, whether it's pharma or med device, is marketing their product or manufacturing their product in multiple regions, now you've got a problem, right? From an AI perspective, you've got a number of countries coming up with their own laws related to AI. And in addition to that, there are a number of frameworks that are emerging to help guide us through how to keep our AI frameworks in a controlled state. And then, of course, there's a number of standards out there as well that you could take a look at. But the big question that often comes up is like, well, that's overwhelming. What do I do? And my answer, and I might pick your brain for this one, Elise, but my answer has always been lean into the one that's the most well-defined. I was on a panel yesterday and this topic came up, and the person most qualified to answer that answered the question, a woman who's very senior in the regulatory space. And she said, it's really about finding that sort of common ground across all of them. So you really need to look to your regulatory team to really understand what direction you're going to go. I've heard some folks say, I'm going to try and adhere to the EU AI Act because it's probably one of the more defined regulations at the moment. But that's one of the big question marks that we have right now. I don't know, Elise, if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, I think, and they are changing daily. So exactly like you said, when we wrote our policy and our procedure, we're really feeding them into ChatGPT with all these laws and everything. And we're saying, do a crosswalk, right? Do pull out where there are commonalities between all of them and then where there's not, right? And that's really helped us a lot because like when we're writing it, Annex 22 came out, and then even our industry standards, ISPE, that AI GAM came out. So we're constantly trying that unified compliance model, but just keep feeding them in against our processes. I think we'll have to do this for a long time as they come out.
Yeah, that was a great answer, Elise. I actually, even when I was giving a presentation like this a while back, I actually just went in and showed, here's how you can actually do that. And in some cases, I was like, well, for a particular process, right? Where does it fall from a risk perspective in the EU AI Act, right? And it was pretty precise in its response. So any questions regarding regulatory risk and uncertainty?
That could probably that could be like a whole entire session in itself.
Yeah, it could be.
This is such a chunky and ever-changing area. So I love this list. Thank you for sharing it. But wow, this is such a deep topic.
And it's interesting because the key challenge here is, right, what Elise said, it's evolving, right? It's never, I don't know that we'll ever get to a point where it's all really, in fact, when we're talking to, I attend a lot of conferences, and when we're talking to individuals that are regulators that come to the conferences, oftentimes some of the responses are quite eye-opening. So don't wait for us, define standards within the industry, right? And so you have to think about that as well. So what are some of the things we can be doing on the platform to build safer AI? So going from risk to governance to readiness. So one thing I wanted to highlight is something new from Salesforce. So in the past, and I think that many of you, especially Shannon, may be familiar with, in the past, there was healthcare and life sciences cloud, right? And I always felt like life sciences was like the stepchild, right? Within what I considered to be health cloud, right? Oh, and they put the LS on the end, right?
Thanks, Viva.
Right, true, so true. Because of contractually, that was a constraint. But now we're moving into a scenario in an age where Salesforce is now starting to release true life sciences applications. And there's one really new one called Customer Cloud Engagement. And it's really it's a conversational interface for HCP engagement. But one thing that struck me as interesting was, whoa, medical, legal, regulatory review content. They officially stepped into the GxP space. And I thought, well, okay, but there's a few more things that come along with that, right? There's regulations associated with marketing material. There's the standard 21 CFR Part 11 for how you handle electronic records and electronic signatures. Well, they came prepared and they created a pre-validated version of that application. So what does that mean? It basically means they've provided the evidence that the system adheres to regulation and it comes with audit ready test evidence. And of course, there's a number of things that are built into the Agentforce trust layer anyway that also help us. For example, the zero copy integration has always been there, meaning we can integrate with other systems without pulling data into Salesforce. So the reason I bring this up is because this is a clear indication that now we're living in a mixed world, right? We're living in a world where we've got multiple clouds, some are regulated, some are not. And how do we control this environment? And there's agents sitting on top of it, right? So I think this is a great opportunity for people like us, whether you're in industry and you're using Salesforce or you're a consulting firm using Salesforce. If you have that regulatory background, this is an area where you can shine. Not a lot of people really understand this space when they're coming from a pure CRM Salesforce perspective. So I feel like we're all at an advantage here.
Roz,
So yes.
I would love to hear more, and it's probably at another time, but about what the audits have looked like, particularly if the FDA is coming in and what those, I think we all remember the days where we would open our SOP books and be like, here you go, good luck in there. And this is like so new that I'm wondering even physically how the audits are working in this way.
I will say that there's a shift more towards, but I'm gonna, Elise, if you're still there, I can't tell. I'll let you talk to that one too, because Elise she didn't mention it, but she works for Moderna.
Yeah.
And so she has some real world answers there. I can say that it's definitely swaying towards electronic audits, but that isn't the case in every scenario. Right? It can't be, right? But at least if you wanted to share your thoughts.
Just real quick, it's definitely the FDA. I'll just take the FDA, not like Swissmedic, all of them, Health Canada, but the FDA has like that tool also where it monitors already the data of manufacturing sites they find problematic. And then in the industry, what we're getting ready for is they will start to come in and have their own inspection agent to pull through our quality management system, pull through our MES system, pull through. So gone are the days where we could buy time, right? Because they're going to get all the data right at their fingertips. So what we're doing is we're trying to get ahead of it and working on our own AI, like inspection, so we can, okay, let's use what we think they're going to use and run it through. But yeah, I think it's going to be here quicker than we know. Sorry, but I think the days where you could overwhelm them with binders and all that, it's not going to happen anymore.
Does that mean that the checks need to happen a lot more frequently than these businesses are prepared for?
Yeah, and I also think we better clean up our data. So sorry, I've been in this industry like Rosalind over 20 some years, and I think there will be a lot of things we have to do better in the industry because we better be better with our CAPAs, our deviations, our trending, because now, the agent's going to do it, right? And so, yeah. And I do think you are right, though, when we go into look at stuff, we're going to always have to be checking, right? Always have to be monitoring, always have to do that. So it's coming quick. I think due to resources in our agencies and how they're so far behind on inspections, I think they're going to chase it. Yep. Sorry, took too much time.
No, you didn't. You just made me,
Yeah.
my facial expression was like, oh yeah. And then we have all the, the challenges with the current layoffs.
Exactly.
I think half of them have been furloughed. So yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you, Elise. By the way, we're really happy you joined us today. It's been great having you
Me
here.
too. I canceled a meeting. I was supposed to be in this 5-hour meeting and I saw you were speaking. So I said I did it. And sorry, I'm not on camera, you guys. But yeah, I canceled the meeting because I wanted to see this. But yeah.
You're just trying to get out of a 5-hour meeting, you can be on.
Exactly. You're right.
And so this is just a deeper dive into what I had just talked about it, but really, I think you can You could deploy a process like MLR without a full understanding of the impact, but I think it's important that you understand what parts are under a GxP microscope and what parts may not be, right? And so, although this diagram doesn't necessarily flow 100%, you can't really tell where it starts. But if you think about where it's the green box here, the marketing and the Agentforce AI, drafting marketing content, right? It starts there. It could be a person or it could be Agentforce, but let's in this scenario say it's AI. As soon as it leaves this scenario where you've got draft content, and an agent might be routing that content for approval to publish, the agent's doing a little bit of thinking, right? It depends, right? It depends on what that marketing material contains, right? Does it contain information that requires a legal review or requires a regulatory review? Or maybe it doesn't, it just gets published, but it just gets sent to marketing for approval and published. But there's a scenario where it might not, right? And actually the colors are a little off here, but let's say it's sent for medical review. That's interesting because at that point, it went from green to red, right? Because now it's in a GxP workflow and we need to start actually version controlling that marketing material and getting electronic sign-offs from a regulatory perspective and from a legal perspective. And so you really have to think about where are the decision points? Who's making that decision? Are we allowing the agent to make that decision? Is there still someone in the loop to ensure that the decision made by the agent was accurate? And I'm going to leave it at that, but I think you're going to have to start thinking about defining your process maps and really understanding what the decision points are and who's accountable for those decisions. And I thought this was a great way to illustrate that because it's a module that's being released as we speak that sort of crosses those boundaries. Any comments or questions?
No, I just love a visual chart, so thank you for putting that together.
Yeah, I thought a visual would do the conversation justice.
Yeah, definitely helpful.
So just talking about what are the best practices. So as I mentioned before, you really have to have some sort of governance on top of your deployment of agents, really defining their role. That's what you hear all the time, right? Define your agent's role. What are the things it can do? What are the things it can't do? Those are the typical types of things you hear in conversations about AI deployment and specifically Agentforce. But once you move into regulated spaces and life sciences, it's a little bit more than that. It's like you can't just define a role. You also have to know the intended use, the actual software that you're using, who that decision's gonna impact, whether it's product, patient, etc. Right? It's not just a matter of defining roles anymore. And of course, always keeping the human in the loop. You've heard that a million times. There is a feature called Atlas Session Tracing, which is going to give you have to turn it on, but it's going to give you that view into the reasoning and thought process that it took to provide a response. And then behind every agent, there are prompts. Those prompts, if you make any changes to them, your agents need to be under change control, right? And any change to those underlying prompts need to be under change control. So you really have to think about that as well. So I know I'm giving you a lot of information and I knew that going in, but it's more of a food for thought type of conversation because Salesforce is introducing us into a mixed environment at this point in time. Another key thing that we have always done in life sciences is really from inception, we like to look at our data and segment it and understand it from those three angles again, whether it contains PII, whether it contains PHI, et cetera. You really need to get down to that level of detail to ensure that you're not exposing data that shouldn't be exposed to end users through agents. You need to, if you're familiar with data and data migrations and data interfaces, there's processes of moving data called transformation pipelines. That also needs to be, if it's in a GxP environment, validated. You need to be, as Elise said, it's important to make sure that your data is clean and protected. And then, as I mentioned before, the ability to track the lineage across number one, your sources, but Salesforce Data Cloud is where data will typically land and be used by Agentforce. And then the agents themselves, right? You need to be able to track the decisions that the agents were making. And so the last one I threw in there, I'm curious who knows what it really means. So Elise probably does, but I've called on her enough. So retrieval augmented generation, it's essentially a way for you to use internal data and documents to ground your agents in your processes, your procedures, or whatever it is, right? So you can load your policies and procedures into Data Cloud, and that will help your agents to make more informed decisions based on your internal processes. And so that's another thing that should be considered. So I think we're coming to the end here. I wanted to keep this relatively food for thought. Again, as Shannon said, those regulations, there's lots of them. You kind of, familiarity is key. You're not the expert. You've got folks within your organizations who are playing the role of regulatory oversight, but it's important for you to have some understanding. Elise isn't, you're not, I'm going to make a statement on your behalf. You're not in the regulatory team, but you certainly, as you said, have a good understanding of regulation. Process and data governance transformation is key to data trust. I mentioned lineage is non-negotiable. We always have to explain to our auditors. They'll ask, please provide the data that led to this decision, right? And you have to go find that information. And you better be able to do it pretty quickly. A lot of times when I say that, it's not you that they'll ask, but they'll ask someone within the organization, and we're just preparing them to be able to respond, right? Design for auditability. Salesforce has done some of that for us with their latest 21 CFR Part 11 adherence. And then just lastly, Agentforce and Data Cloud, they're tools, but it's our job to ensure that the systems are running in a controlled state. And that's kind of what I had for you today. I don't know if it was insightful, but I wanted to give you a peek into where things are going. And I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was amazing. I only have my industry experience all is on the GCP side, right? And so what I've been watching is this potential interoperability when we're thinking about anything that's electronic, any electronic data collection, really in drug R&D, and watching people get ensconced again in point solutions and thinking off a platform is something that I see a lot of our clients struggle with. And one of the things I want to be able to do, Rosalind, is point them to you because I right now can think of 30 people that need to talk to you because you clearly have a really cogent concept of what has to happen here. Like I'm sweating. I'm so excited about what you're doing. So how can everybody that's on this call and watching this video later get in touch with you? Tell us more about your company and who you serve, please.
Absolutely. So definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can find me, my name, Rosalind Beasley, and I can share my LinkedIn profile in the chat as well. But so Janari AI is the company that I lead, and we're introducing, we serve life sciences, we serve med tech as well as pharma, but we're introducing a product on the Salesforce platform. It's already in the Salesforce platform, but it really uses AI to help you with some of the things that we just talked about, right? So helping you to understand your ecosystem of applications that spread across both spread across both non-GxP, and giving you an understanding of the health of those systems and whether or not they're adhering to particular regulations, and also helping you automate that process. So I feel like we're on the precipice of a really great and valuable idea that we have and we're introducing, and would love to speak with anyone who's open to chatting. Hopefully that was helpful.
That was incredible. And I know we're going to be sharing your information out. My gosh, Rosalind, that was beautiful. I think everybody here probably wants to join me in giving Rosalind a big virtual round of applause.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So great.
Thank you.
Thanks. So everybody connect with Rosalind. We will get this recording out so Rosalind can give us thumbs up and thumbs down on what we can share out, and then we'll get it out to everybody else. Everyone who's watching this later, we're sorry you didn't join it live, but Rosalind said you can connect with her on LinkedIn, so please do that.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Rosalind, so much, and have fun at your conference today.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.